Greetings, everyone. This is the Hipster Snack, and today joining me are three of my closest Tomodachi brothers. The first being Mr. Clockwork Fiction.
Burning the can of both ends really sucks sometimes.
Yes, it does. And after him comes Cog.
I'm right there with you, Mr. Clockwork.
And alphabetically, then is Mr. Ditaku.
I feel like you guys just need to walk it off.
Because you can definitely do that with fatigue.
Yes.
So,
just like, broken arms or whatever.
Right,
you
exactly.
Just walk it off.
Exactly. I'll walk this off. It's fine. And my arm's like off my body, and I'm just carrying it in my other hand, but I can walk this off. So let's get into nerd news of the week.
All right. Little short list. Just going to throw some key points out here. Armored Core gameplay trailer was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really fun. I am super hyped for that game. And I think it's going to be awesome. One thing I thought was kind of weird is that some people think, and they didn't really show a lot of it, is some people think this was going to be like an open world game. And I'm like, I could have sworn all Armored Core games were all mission based, but I'm assuming that not a lot of people have actually played a lot of the Armored Core games. So I guess we'll kind of find out when it actually releases. FanFest Final Fantasy 14 has dropped a bunch of news. The big PowerPoints new cap is level 100. The new expansion is called Dawn Trail. The trailer is really nice. Crossplay with Xbox is coming. So if you have an Xbox, you can now play the game. You'll be able to play the game. And have and be able to play with the PlayStation and PC people. You can there's gonna be 2 die slots now for every piece of pieces of armor. So instead of just 1 die, you'll be able to do different colors and different parts, which hasn't really been shown yet. That's kind of just the general what they've said. Graphics update. You're going to need a slightly better computer here to run it, but it is a lot of really nice little details and everything.
To be fair, that game used to be playable on the PS3. It's time to adapt.
Yes. And then last but not least, they have teased 2 GPS classes. We don't know what they are. Some people think it has to do with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because apparently Yoshi P was wearing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt, which I haven't seen, or somebody was at one point, and people were joking that we already have Ninja and Samurai, so what could it be? We'll most likely get that during a dev letter farther down the line.
The real question about this update is, are we still going to have polygonal grapes?
Those got taken out a while ago, unfortunately.
Oh, did they? I have not been back, but I remember seeing
cosplays of those grapes. And people were giving squishy plushies as gifts for those grapes. So it is definitely within their spectrum of reality that those can return at one point if they wanted them to. The Legend of Zelda Ages and Seasons has come to the Switch. 2 really good Zelda games, and some actually my favorite Zelda games to play on the Game Boy S. I think I played them on the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP. I don't remember what they were for personally.
They were originally
the Game Boy Color.
They were Game Boy Color games, but they could be played on a GBA.
Yeah. I remember playing them mostly on the SP because I think that's where I mostly played them on.
That's the Noodles' favorite of the Zelda games, apart from Wind Waker.
And then, weirdly enough, there was an announcement for Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl 2, which, when I looked at it, looked like somewhat of a visual upgrade. All the characters coming back, at least most of the characters coming back from what I see, and some of the DLC characters. And then they also are adding Squidward from SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm not sure what to take of this. I played the first one a little bit. I had some fun, but I didn't play too much of it. This seems like they're doing the same thing except with voice acting and a slight graphics update. Maybe the gameplay has changed. I'm not sure. I know the first game, I watched some combo videos of people going from 0 to death with certain characters, and that doesn't seem very, very fun if the entire game is going to be touch of death the entire time.
But it's not, because that's not how normal people play party fighters, dude. Like, I played the game for a bit, and like it's actually like way better than I felt it would have been. Dutaku was cool enough.
And you do know that the original has voice acting now, right? You are aware of that?
They added it later on. Yes,
they added it later on. Yes, I didn't really play it when they actually added it. That's why I just kind of put it in there.
And the sequel is actually going to have all 4 Ninja Turtles this time.
Oh, that's nice.
The first one only has Leonardo and Michelangelo. Yeah, maybe that's why the dev for 14 was wearing a turtle shirt.
Maybe that'd be an interesting.
That'd be a crossover.
Smash Brothers is going to be dethroned. Nickelodeon All Stars is the new hotness.
This didn't really make it on the docket because I don't know if anyone here plays Fall Guys, but they apparently Final Fantasy 14 is doing a crossover with Fall Guys where you can get costumes of different characters.
It kind of makes sense for Fall Guys because Fall Guys is basically the Village Bicycle in terms of its corporate crossover events. But like apparently there's going to be Fall Guys stuff that will be available in 14, which is harder for me to put my head around.
Yeah. And that is all I have on my little docket here.
I have something.
Fire away.
What do you have?
Well, right now I have my Switch in my hand, but regardless of that, I just saw that a new game just got a gameplay trailer, Fate Samurai Remnants, and it is looking sick.
Nice. I remember seeing the teaser for that, and it looked interesting.
Yeah, it looks really good, and it's a lot more action focused than a lot of the other Fate games, which is great because as much as I love Fate Extra, I would never honestly talk to someone who's like, "Oh, I'm new to Fate. I'm gonna, what game should I play?" And it would never be Fate Extra. It's the gameplay is not very good as much as I like the writing, but I suppose that's just kind of true of the entire Moon Cell setting for Fate. It's very impenetrable.
It's like
it looks good.
Like you can't start with Fate Stay Night because it has spoilers for Fate Zero, but you can't do Fate Zero because it has spoilers for Fate Stay Night.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, Fate's fun.
So I'm excited for that, and I think that Saber looks really good. I'm not really disappointed that the main servant is the Saber and it's an ultra face again. I imagine that the professor's probably going to get upset because you can't play as his waifu, who is another one of the servants. But and I don't know. I don't know. Well, it's Musashi. It's Berserker Musashi is the Berserker.
No, is she? Okay.
Yeah.
I knew she was in it, but I didn't know what role she was in.
Is the Berserker. So,
all right.
And I don't know who Saber is supposed to be because honestly, at this point, she kind of looks like someone from the Kamakura Shogunate era. But at this point, I'm like, pretty much everyone who I know of has already been from that period of Japanese history has already been identified. So, unless they're going to do something like, it's it's like a Lily version of Raiko, which, they could do, I guess.
I hope not. Lilies and altars are stupid.
Oh, they are. I agree. Honestly, she doesn't really look like Raiko, so I'm not, going to think that it's her, but
right.
I mean, considering that Raiko has said before that her optimal class is Saber, I'm like, I mean, it theoretically could be her, but I wouldn't put money on it.
No, definitely not.
So, yeah, that's coming out not in October. I'm looking forward to it. I am seriously considering pre-ordering it because I really like Fate. I'm one of those weirdos, so...
That seems fair. Cog, do you have any contributions for nerd news?
The only one I guess I have, because I'm just way behind with everything else. MechWarrior 5 is getting a new update.
Oh, nice.
The Dragon's Gambit. So it's supposed to be a new story. It's supposed to have I guess it's going to build into its own little campaign story. It's supposed to follow the events of the after events of the Fourth Succession War, after the Davion Steiner alliance storyline. For anybody that knows anything close about that, so it's which probably is not a lot, but those that do know about a MechWarrior and BattleTech, it's a pretty cool little portion of the history.
Are they actually going to be leading into the clan invasion then? Because that's basically what that part of history was.
I do not believe so. This was the actual summary. It's in the aftermath of the Fourth Succession War. The Davion Steiner alliance has dealt a devastating blow to the Capellan Confederation, leaving First Prince Hans Davion eager to replicate this success against the Draconis Combine. Bugino Kanari Theodore Kurita, which, sorry if I butchered that name, fully aware of the encroaching menace posed by the FedCom alliance, has taken decisive action to fortify the Combine's defenses against the inevitable war. As tensions rise, a unique opportunity presents itself. Unite with the Draconis Combine and rally behind Kurita's audacious and unexpected plan. So I think it's going to be mostly about those battles. I don't think it's going to lead into. But then again, I don't know. I was not sure if MechWarrior 5 was even going to get another update or not. So it's just pretty cool.
Nice.
I need to get good at that game. I really enjoy it, but there's certain fights I get into where it's like I could win this, and then suddenly half my team's dead, and I got like one gun left. I'm like, oh no, this is going to cost me a fortune.
Oh, that just remind me. I actually, I don't know if you guys play it, but the actual tabletop game, I've decided to splurge a little bit, and I got myself a new star of mechs. I'm going to be getting a Stone Rhino, a Marauder 2, a Supernova, and I want to say an Arctic Cheetah.
Nice.
Something
like that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of those weirdos that actually likes clan mechs, so...
I mean, I like them. I like both of them. They all have their ups and downs. So
that's true of any mech, really.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that said, the only nerd news I have is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is getting a new expansion, and multiple playable characters are coming, including a special mutations mode where you can briefly play as boss characters. So that looks pretty promising. The first character that we know of for sure is Miyamoto Usagi. And for all you little babus out there who have never read Stan Sakai's works, his name is Miyamoto Usagi. It's a play on Miyamoto Musashi. Usagi Yojimbo is the name of the tale, of the story. Stop being dumb and wrong, okay? Like that's all there is to it. And yeah, that's all there is to what I had. Other than that, I picked up Fire Emblem 3 Houses on the cheap, and I still paid too much because it sucks. I don't like it. Am I going to beat it? Yes, because it's the principle of the thing. But I'm not enjoying myself.
Mm.
Maybe I'll do a review of that. That could be a review. Look forward to that. That'll be a review.
Unfortunate. I was kind of looking forward to that one.
Get Engage. I hear it's like a million times better.
I see.
So, that said, actually, all this talk about 14.
Even though it has the toothpaste hair protagonist?
It does, but apparently that's actually tied to a relevant plot point because it's actually reflective of a morality system where the hair will eventually flush red or blue depending on certain decisions you make. So, weird, but I think it would have been funnier if they had followed the memes and just made it like it's the color of whatever Switch controllers you have. Because I've seen ones where like, oh, I want them to have like green and purple hair. That'd be funny. But no, apparently that's not the case.
That would be funny.
No, I think that'd be great, especially as mine are black, so it would completely defeat the purpose.
So yours becomes a Saiyan then.
Yeah, basically. So all this talk about 14's updates is rather serendipitous. Today we're talking about a very particular genre of the video, and that is the MMOPGR, the MMO. Cog has opinions. Why don't you lead us into this today, Cog?
I have had very unpleasant experiences with the MMOs, the MMO games. I'm not a fan, generally speaking. I've tried to play several of them. I'll get into them for a while, and then I usually fall off because I mostly feel like I like to get somewhat engaged into the characters and stories and things, and half the times when I'm playing MMOs, it's like, you start going into it as, oh, you're the special one, and then it cuts out, and you're of course not the special one. It's really just game devs hurting flocks and flocks of gamers together, and just it's not my thing. Not to mention, like, a lot of them are really grindy. A lot of them are very hyper monetized. I've tried to get into them. I continue to try to play them. The last one I think I really got into, of course, I'm gonna show my norminess, but it's fine. I think the last one I played significantly was besides playing 14 with these guys briefly, it was like Marvel Heroes, because that was basically Diablo 2 but with Marvel skins. And then like DC Universe Online, I think.
Yeah, you and I played that.
Yeah, and then Star Trek Online briefly. But at the end of the day, they're not my thing. I really, I'm sure we'll get into it more we kind of talk about it, but I think the overall genre of MMO, I guess I'm specifically speaking about MMORPGs, because there are a lot of other MMO, type, I guess, things out there, but it's just never really been my thing. I play them for a little while. I've never gotten sucked into them to the point that, like, I must dedicate my whole day to this. No, it's not ever been a thing for me.
No, and honestly, I'm very similar in a lot of different ways. I have tried a lot, and I mean like a stupid number of MMOs. And usually my interest will last like a week, maybe two. Like, they have to do something really fundamentally right to get me to still care. To give you some examples, I played Fly for Fun, which is a misleading title because it's not fun. And even when you fly, it's still not fun. I played Fiesta Online, which, I don't know, we kind of had some fun with that, but like once you get past like level 20-ish, you hit the grind wall, and then it becomes pay shop the game, which is honestly what kills a lot of these games. We'll get into that, I'm sure. Actually, let me lead with this. I am not against a game a free game having a cash shop, because there are ways to do it ethically. We actually touched on this a bit during our mobile games episode, and I think a lot of the points there are still true here. Because a good example of this is some of the costumes my character has in Final Fantasy XIV are cash shop items. But you know what? Nothing in the game held a gun against my head and said, nope, you can't complete this quest till you pay us 20 USD there, punk. And at the same time, my costumes don't give me a mechanical advantage. It's just I wanted to have a pretty princess dress because I thought it would be funny to put on my Dark Knight.
It's true.
The dress that is so poofy and my character is so tall that Lalafell can hide underneath that.
It's true. He's actually had Lalafell's hide underneath him like some kind of weird chicken.
Yep. I can take my ducklings with me. Just they can hide under my dress and no one will ever see them because it is so big and poofy, which is what makes it the perfect Dark Knight glam, really. I'll put a screenshot on screen for you guys at this point in the video, but yeah, like the cash shop can be done well and it can be done ethically. Like that was actually a thing I had to learn the hard way because I did a review for Dead or Alive 6 and someone in the comments was like, did you hear about the hair dye thing? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, you can change the character's hair colors for $1 and to change it back to like their original default hairstyle, hair color is another $1. And I was like, oh my God, I completely missed that. I never even saw that was a thing. Like I didn't know you could do anything with their hair color, so I never bothered. But I looked it up. I was like, oh my God, it's so much worse than I thought. That is how you do bad cash shop. That's bad, okay? That's bad, okay? You shouldn't do abusive cash shops, okay? Like, actually, here's a good example. A good example of a good way of handling situations is Warframe. Warframe had a particular thing. I think it had to do with the Kubras, like the dogs that you can take with you. And like you would pay real money, the platinum. They're paid for currency, which you don't necessarily have to pay for, by the way. You can get it by selling items and stuff on the player market. But you would use platinum.
I'll say for a hot minute, you actually were pretty heavily into the item market. You made a pretty good amount of plat that way.
I had sold several items from Popping Relics and made a pretty good load. And I also had bought a couple. Some of that was paid and some of it was earned. And then I would buy a bunch of frames that I really wanted to assemble piece by piece. So yeah, and that was I was pretty involved. And yeah, there was like this thing with the Kubras where I don't remember if it was like their fur color or something. You could do something that was completely optional and harmless. It didn't cost a whole lot, but they saw that players were using it too much and they removed it from the game because they were afraid it was becoming too addictive. And I'm like, that takes guts to be like, no, guys, you're spending too much real world money on our game and we don't want to be that guy. They actually cut it from the game. And like that is one of those things that just like blows me away about the Warframe guys.
I think what you're talking about is I think if I remember correctly, there's two randomizer. I don't know this story actually, which is weird because I played the game for so long.
Right.
But it might have been because it was kind of in between. I believe there's two when your Kubro egg is hatching, there's pretty much two dice rolls that happen. One is what Kubro it is. And the second one is what color or fur it has. I think that's what was going on. And people were trying to get probably like rare fur colors or something, or like a specific one so that way your Kubro looks, I guess, cooler or something like that. Because I remember distinctly that at one point or another, you could purchase with plat or I think you might find them in a game. I'm not 100% sure. Colors you can dye your Kubro's fur now along with armor that you can purchase for them.
Okay.
You can also do it with the cavets, the cat.
Right, I forgot about them. I always use a drone because the living ones are such high maintenance.
Well, they used to be like that. They actually changed it.
Oh, okay.
You can they don't necessarily they don't I don't think they necessarily degrade anymore over time. I believe it has to do with falling in combat now. If not going falling, but actually fully dying. If your Cavit or Kubro dies, it loses a percentage of its like health, kind of like you lose a percentage of its health, and then you can use a thing to bring that back up, which doesn't cost any, which I think just costs credits or platinum depending on what you want to spend.
I mean, that's fair, but again, they're really good about their cash shop items because, like, you can get certain things. Well, here's the thing: there's nothing in Warframe you can't get for free. Like, it's not a pay-to-win situation. It's a pay-to-grind a little bit less than you would have otherwise.
See, the thing is,
don't worry.
What I want to point out is that the biggest thing is the fact that, as we stated twice or three times, I'm going to say the fourth time, is that the premium currency can be traded amongst other players,
right?
And like spent kind of as like a trading currency. So if you could play completely free, sell items on the market to get premium currency from other players and purchase premium items with it, and you can still be a free player. That is a big bonus for a free-to-play game, to be able to play completely free and still get premium items.
Yeah, exactly. That is an example of a good example. So let's talk about the Korean sweatshop edition. Like, Fiesta Online is actually a good example of this, because like so much is like, oh, you hit level 20, you hit the grind wall. Do you have to grind for infinity hours now, or you can go to the cash shop and for $19.99 we'll boost your XP. It's like XP boosters, like buying legendary equipment. Loot boxes, of course, which like there's already been a huge discourse on loot boxes, and those are thankfully finally going the way of the dodo. So it's like there are so many predatory monetization options available in these games, and that's the thing that can be super interest killing. A really good YouTuber about this is Josh Strife Hayes. I love his stuff. He has a series called The Worst MMO Ever, which is a bit of a hyperbolic title because he does good MMOs in the show too. But the whole thing is he goes in, he talks about the game and how the mechanics work, and then he goes into he always talks about the cash shop and how the cash shop works. And like, I think that the cash shop is almost mandatory if your game is free or relatively cheap. And you have to monetize your product somehow. And if the product is free, then the person who uses it is the product, aka the Google method. So there has to be something. There has to be some way for them to get return on investment. It's just that some of these do it in the worst possible ways, and that kills so much of the genre for me. And I'll go a step further beyond cash shops. The MMOs I hate the most are mobile game MMOs, because you'll see them and you're like, oh, it's like a cute action adventure fantasy title, maybe this will be good, and then you get that one screen. And if you played any of these, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like, oh, pick your class. And you always have the column and the rows. It's like, oh, here's your warrior, here's your wizard, here's your bow, here's your monk, here's your lolly. Because it's always like that. And then it's like, oh, because you're using a phone, you don't have buttons, so you just tap to automate everything. And you watch the game play itself. That's not a game, folks. That's a movie. And there's much better movies to watch than you whacking the most generic fantasy animals available with a stick.
Yeah, I love it. I love the aspect and the part of, all my favorite high fantasy stories where it's like, oh, yes, there's, the sword guy, the fighter. There's the high acting acrobatic, ranger, and there's the little girl. Oh man, we couldn't have won the battle without the little girl.
There is always like, this is so freaky. Like, okay, this is something you just have to accept when you're really, really like, waist deep in Japanese culture. But like the East Asiatic obsession with lollies, it's really freaking uncomfortable. Okay, I don't like it. No, sir. I don't like it. I don't like Lalafell. I don't like any of your other weird generic elf fairy creatures in WoW. I only played 2 races in WoW, so I can't really comment on WoW very much. I don't like it. Stop doing it. If you're a game dev, do not do that. No, bad. You need to be in jail somehow.
Yeah.
I don't believe the gnomes and the goblins would be considered lollies in that, depending on what your definition is of it.
And maybe
they can't
not
just be short, technically speaking, because they all have like facial hair and stuff like that.
Fair.
Completely above the age of consent.
Okay, you know what? I'll own that just because you know better than I would, because I played WoW twice. In fact, okay, story time. I played WoW twice. Once when I was in college, and once about 2 or 3 years ago. Both times I did the free demo edition to see what the game was about. In college, it was at the insistence of the lady I was seeing at the time, and I made a dwarf fighter, and the game had the automation problem. I didn't really know where I was going, so I was like, oh, you can push this button to just go to the quest. So I would push the button and watch my dwarf go to the quest. And then I would have him hit the wolves. And because I was level 1, I didn't have any skills, so he just hit the wolves automatically. So I was watching my dwarf hit the wolves. And then I would watch him walk back to turn in the quest. And then he would walk to the next quest. And I realized I'm not playing a game. Little did I know I was just playing Final Fantasy 13 a few years early. This I didn't like it. It sucked. So then I tried it again, and this is my olive branch. Okay, WoW fans, put down the pitchforks and snack effigies. I played it a few years ago.
WoW sucks. WoW sucks. It's always sucked.
I agree, but not for the same reasons. So, like the whole thing that happened is a few years ago, a coworker was like, you can't say you hate WoW if you haven't played it in years and years and years and years. And I'm like, technically true. It's kind of like you have to try it before you can knock it. So I was like, fine. So I picked the best race in the game, which is the Pandaren, and I made a hunter. And I was like, cool, they get guns. That's awesome. This is already a million times better than I thought I could do. And it has like some monster powers where like you can capture certain monsters and turn them into your pets. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm on board for this. This sounds great. So I send my weird chubby panda waifu out into the world, and I get thrown onto this island. And they're like, okay, you're with the Alliance, and you have this shipwreck, and you're trying to save the people who wrecked on this island. And there's like these big cyclopean monsters, and you have to go deal with them. So I did. And I was like, okay, I'm engaged. There's a logical through line. I have my goal. I have my abilities to meet that goal. And the tutorial was very, very well executed. A+. Great tutorial.
Question real quick.
Yeah.
What was your dwarf again?
My dwarf was a warrior or a fighter. He had some kind of sword.
Okay. Just to preface this, for context, I'm assuming you only played the dwarf warrior. If you played a dwarf hunter, you would have probably had the same problem because they would have had a gun. You'd be like, "Oh, cool, a gun," but you're going to be shooting some wolf in the tundra, and then you would pull out your axe, start swinging the axe, and you'll have the same problem because.
Well, that also would have been over.
The hunter at the time, I don't remember if it was level 10 or level 20. I don't remember off the top of my head because it's been a long time since I played old WoW. They got Tame Beast, which you automatically get a beast right now at the beginning of the game. Now you didn't get it before. You had to wait until level 10 to tame your beast, and then you had to feed it specific food to make it happy to do more damage.
Of course,
and to heal it. I think it healed when you fed it. I know you get a spell to also heal it too. So it was a lot. There's a lot more roll around it too. But I want to preface that a lot of the stuff he's talking about is newer WoW too.
Yes, this is just like 2 years ago. My Dwarf Warrior was when I was in college, which was over 10 years ago.
The game, by retrospect, is much better than it was 10 years ago. Even for me and my shattered rose tinted glasses with the red shards in my eyes. It is definitely a lot smoother leveling and the actual
and that's true. That's true.
Gameplay is a lot. I'm not snarking the story. What I'm trying to say is that what I'm trying to get at is that MMO progression has progressed very well very well, because generally speaking, you'll have until like level 10 or 20, a quarter to whatever level you need to get to. You'll have like 2 buttons, and you'll be fighting wolves, and you'll be like, well, this kind of sucks. Like, when do I get to the good part? And then you start ramping up and doing dungeons, and you find some buddies to do a party with, or some randos, and then you start talking with them. And then see, the whole thing is that it's like playing Final Fantasy or Realm Reborn. You gotta play through it until it gets good.
Well, I'll get to that later, because that's
why do I want to even think the time in to get to that point if it takes so far freaking long? That's the other part.
Well, a part of it.
So that's kind of the thing, though, too, is what does MMO stand for? Massively multiplayer online. The beginning of it is generally, as people will say, is to get your feet wet. They don't want to throw 20 skills at you. They don't want to throw a talent tree and how does this work? How does that work? Or because you'll have 20 tutorials on your screen, and you're going to literally install the game from the get-go if they did that. But if they ground you and say, hey, we're going to give you 2 attacks, or like 1 attack, you're going to whack some wolves a bit, then you're going to whack some trogs a bit, and as you level, you'll start getting a couple more attacks, you'll get a couple more abilities, and as you grow, the game will get faster, and the game will get faster and more responsive as you grow with the game.
That is the common perception. I wish to offer a counter argument, and not to you, but to the overall concept behind that style of game design. The idea is you want to give the player a safe environment in which to do the tutorial, but there's lots of different ways of doing a really good tutorial. To give you an example, I played, what was the name of it? Hang on. Hidden World or something. Sorry, I had to scroll through the thousands of games I have on Steam.
While you look for that, I just want to also preface this that the original tutorial worlds and stuff like that you play in World of Warcraft right now. I don't know if you were able to see it during the time you played because this was relatively more in a kind of not recent. It was like 2 or 3 expansions ago, but they pump these things out every 2-3 years at this point.
Right.
They have tutorial islands now, like the Pandaren Islands, but it's more recent than that, where a lot of the stuff where you get a couple more ability, and they kind of fast track you a bit more to getting to the content.
Well, and that was actually kind of part of the issue that I encountered, because the whole thing was that the tutorial was kind of its own little self-contained story, and so it made perfect sense. I was able to dive right in. I'm the Alliance. I'm the good guy. Horde is bad. Get on with it. Cool. That's literally all I needed. So then I get off the tutorial island, which, again, great tutorial, fantastic setup. It taught me my powers. It was logically paced, really good stuff. Immediately upon disembarking, I ended up in a situation where they're talking about stuff that I had no context for. They started talking about plot points that happened years ago in completely separate expansions, and they just gave me this 3-sentence explanation. Oh, you have to go to the town with Person. And I was like, what does that matter? And they're like, oh, Person's a traitor to that town. I'm like, then why are we sending Person to town? And they're like, oh, well, she's the only envoy we have because I'm the king and I say so. And I'm like, but if she betrayed the town, no one in the town is going to take us seriously. And lo and behold, I was right, because as soon as we show up, Person and I get thrown in jail. But then dashing dude shows up and he's like, hey, I'm a cool character that you would know if you had played this game for the last 25 years, and I'm going to help you because I'm a cool guy. And I'm like, Okay. And the story just goes insane. And I have no idea what's happening. I have no context for who these characters are or what they've been through or what any of these places are or what any of these places have been through or what any of these places mean. If there was ever incentive to play through a Realm Reborn, it's because the Eorzean continent is the biggest plot point for the first major meta arc of Final Fantasy, which only ended as of Endwalker. As a result, going through that first 30 levels, I'd argue, which is where I stopped originally, you should do it if only to get a handle for the characters. But even then, I think it should be sped up considerably because, to your earlier point, you mentioned you don't want to give the player a bunch of buttons. Maybe you do. The skill of the player should vary with the skill of the class. I remember when I unlocked Red Mage in 14, it was a lot. But it only took me about 15 minutes to parse what all it meant and put everything in its proper place. I just dove into it, and Red Mage is...
Wait. Now, take this into context, because what you just said, if you've played the game up to Red Mage, you've played the video game up to Red Mage, which is 50 or 60, you have played a character, you have grown with the character up to a certain level, and then you got a job stone for Red Mage. So Red Mage is a new class. They gave you a bunch of buttons, yes, but you are not stepping into the character's shoes for the first time ever. Do you see the disconnect that I'm talking about? Versus the person who's give Red Mace to somebody who's literally playing the game for the first time, or give it to the person who got to level 61st, and that's the difference I'm trying to point out.
Counterpoint.
I'd argue that Red Mage is different because it basically they go, oh yeah, here's hot cat boy man. I'm a bunch of bad guys. I'll stop you and look very fabulous while doing it. Oh, also this person here, have just an entire boatload of abilities. I don't know what any of these do. It's okay. Looks fabulous.
The biggest counterpoint that I have to that is the relative knowledge of the player is... well, just that. It's exclusive to the player. There is literally no means by which the game dev will know the competency of the player going into the experience. In fact, you can easily get carried by a relatively generous player base and well into levels well beyond your capacity to actually have the competency to excel in them. Every idiot gets promoted one level above his threshold of competency, as the saying goes. So you could easily have been carried to level 50 or 60 and still not know the basics of the game. Counterintuitively, a brand new player could be an MMO veteran who's played every MMO on the market. So handing them something as complex as Red Mage out of the gate would actually make the game more exciting, not less. Now, for some people, that would definitely be an I quit moment, and I found the game I was looking for. It's called Secret World Legends. And one of the very first things it does is when you're picking your class, it tells you about how complex the class is compared to the others you have available to you. I'm an MMO veteran. So I picked it's like some kind of blood sorcerer class where the whole idea is you hurt enemies in order to charge one gauge and then heal yourself with that gauge, but then it also goes around and around. I actually had a ton of fun, and it said that it was one of the most difficult classes in the game. But I think the game is more engaging with that level of difficulty. A big issue that I think game devs suffer from, and it doesn't matter if it's an Eastern or Western dev, they both do this, is they both assume that their players are functionally idiots. And giving the player more freedom to choose classes that are more mechanically or less mechanically complicated, depending on how comfortable they feel, could be a big way to get them through those A Realm Reborn I quit moments.
I do see
hopping down off the soapbox now.
I do see where that can come into play, but I mean, from how I've learned how to play MMOs when I first started. I mean, I did have friends who played as well, which is another thing I wanted to point out, which is MMOs in general. You're playing with your friends and everything like that,
right?
As well, generally speaking, most people who are playing MMOs are not playing by themselves in retrospect. Sometimes you are, like if you're trying to do some some of your dailies for something, or if you're doing some crafting in 14, you might do some solo play here and there. But generally speaking, once you've gotten to they're starting to do dungeons and raids and all that stuff, you're generally playing with your friends and doing content together.
Right.
Which is, I beg the question then, why does every single MMO I've ever played, I'm trying to progress, and it's basically like, oh, yeah, well, you need to do this all by yourself. And it's like, oh, well, then why is it an MMO? Why is this not just a single player game?
So Final Fantasy in general is a Final Fantasy game, as I think Yoshi P has talked about it.
I'm not just talking about 14. I'm also, it's a thing in PSO2 when you're trying to progress the story in order to actually get there were actually additional perks, like getting the Dark Falls mode was something you had to do through the story, and you could only do the story single player.
That's interesting. I haven't played PSO2 that much, so I wouldn't know that one. World of Warcraft, if you play that, you could play from start to finish with a friend and not have any kind of like story cutoffs or thing like that. There might be some instant stuff in the newer content, but you could literally play with a friend and level together and do quests together from start to finish. I think it more depends on the game and what they're trying to do. Because I think I don't know this particularly, but I believe it was at one point because they've been adding the content, or they've been adding a lot of the CPU content in the game. It seems like they're trying to make Final Fantasy 14 as an MMO as possible, but they've been adding a lot of single player elements to it as well, where you can play it from start to finish alone if you so desire. And it's mostly just player choice at that point, whether you want to play alone or with people. But yes, the story content mostly you have to do alone, which is a little weird for an MMO standpoint. But I think it's the way they just chose to do it because it's a because as I said, it's Final Fantasy first and MMO second.
Which is kind of funny in a way. I've actually found that, at least on our server, a lot of the people you encounter are really cool. In fact, one of my biggest turnoffs to getting deeper into several other MMOs was the player base. You get oftentimes forced into some kind of multiplayer content, and then you become pariah because you're the new guy. And it's like, oh my God, you don't know the meta.
That's generally been my experience. Also, I guess I'm just one of the shitty. I'm one of the introverts, basically. So I am one of those guys that will like, because it's hard enough for us to get scheduled to get time together, right? Even just do the podcast, right? So the times that I would be trying to log on to consistently run many of these games, anybody I would be playing them with was either not around or not available. So most of the time I'm either playing by myself or trying to find some random people online, and it's usually not ever really the greatest experience that I've ever had. So
I just want to mention that you think it's hard to get 4 or 5 Tomo Bros together at one time sometimes. Imagine trying to get 20 to 30 people at a time.
No thanks.
Doing World of Warcraft raids back in the day.
No. And now we know the reason why Warcraft has such a bad reputation for having a bunch of sweaty grognards as their fan base.
Yeah, the problem that I encounter in several of these games when you get to that multiplayer content is that level of elitism, where they're like, oh my God, you don't have this memorized, and you don't have the best gear, you haven't ground out for exactly 9,000 hours for the sub 1% drop. Get out, pleb.
Yes.
The one game, there's 2 instances I've ever had where that wasn't really like the norm, and that was Final Fantasy 14 and PSO2. And in those cases, like, they're very different experiences, though. Don't think I'm generalizing them as one, because they're not. In PSO2, you get ignored. Dutaku and I have run several of the urgent missions, which is basically PSO2's large-scale raids, and they just run. They try to speed run that stuff. you get left behind. If you're not keeping pace, they're not going to pay the slightest bit of attention for you for good or for ill. And they're sure not going to heal you because no one ever plays healer classes in that game.
To be fair, we were doing the same thing once we actually got to that level of play too. We basically were like, running around, blowing people up. And can I just say, I do appreciate the fact that PSO2 basically is basically the Bizarro MMO in a lot of ways.
That's true.
No, it is. It's not high fantasy. It's space fantasy. It is not all about, you have to fight the level 5 goblins. No, it literally is, you are on a patrol on the single planet. You're part of this intergalactic, peacekeeping federation. And it goes, you're on patrol on a planet to, there's this strange guy that's been hunting down your agents, to you are fighting a guy who is trying to eat God, and it only gets more ridiculous from there.
Yep. Another thing I want to point out is that one of the things that Final Fantasy has done that helps with that as well is it kind of curates it's very strong in its curation of its player base. There's a lot of times where people will, there's a good amount of healthy videos out there, people going to Final Fantasy jail to talk to a GM about something they've done, or stuff of that nature. And the fact that of the somewhat strict, although don't do it because you'll get banned, use of mods and add-ons that they don't want you to use. Because a big thing with World of Warcraft was that the reason that people would get really salty or really min-maxy is because people would have these what they call DPS charts, and you'd be looking to see who is doing the most damage, who's doing the most healing, who's doing the most optimal healing, etc., so forth. So like you have you have someone who's doing like 20% more damage than everybody else. So he's going to feel like hot stuff, keep it clean, and stuff like that. And, and then you have this one dude who, like, as you said, is like maybe got carried or is trying to do his best, but he's not pulling the damage. And everyone's like, we can't defeat this raid because this dude's doing like sub 5% or something like that. And so they find somebody else. You don't generally have as much of that going on unless you're doing like savage raids and stuff like that. People kind of, still use it and stuff like that. Although you're not supposed to know or tell, but you can kind of know why or where something has happened at one point or another. Specifically because as well as like, there is fun. I find that there is fun in failure in certain games. That's also why I play a lot of fighting games, which is not the topic of conversation of this, but it's because like I lose and I try to learn why I lost. You fall in a dungeon or a raid and you try to figure out why that happened. Like, where did we mess up? Who ate the red circle? Well, what mechanic did we fail at? And I pull up the time that I popped into that one raid that I don't know how or why Snack got into, and we beat it with like 3 minutes to go. Oh, after looking up a guide and stuff like that, because holy crap, that was hard. It was Ultimate or whatever, or Savage or whatever it was. I can't remember off the top of my head. You don't remember that?
I'm not sure.
Say you met like three of your like big friends through that raid, as I recall.
I want to say it was the Ultimate.
Yeah,
I think Savage is above Ultimate, isn't it?
I believe.
Okay, so it had to be Ultimate because I don't do Savage. I don't hate myself that much. Yeah, and like that's actually okay. Let's talk about one of the positives of MMOs, and we've danced around this a couple times already. Is that community thing? And the Final Fantasy 14 guys have generally been great. I've run into a few bad actors and some guys who I would rather blacklist and never deal with again. But in this instance, we met one of our good buddies, and he was one of our healers. And somehow I became the leader of this this ridiculous repeat fail attempt at Ultima. And I was just like, okay, I'm looking at the wiki. I'm trying to figure out where we're going wrong and then putting together the pieces. And this one healer is being really, really proactive. And he's like, yeah, let's come up with a plan. Where do you want us? And they started asking me for like positioning. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. I'm not that good. Don't turn me into the leader of this. But I became the leader somehow. I did recruit Clockwork, like he said. And yeah, we really came together. We knocked it out. And I specifically singled out that healer because he was doing such a good job. I was like, dude, you were awesome. Like, thank you for being on top of it. And we became friends. He would help me with all sorts of different raid content. And he was the one who introduced us to Snekina Snekovich's voice actress, or who would go on to become Snekina Snekovich's voice actress. And like, it's these weird chains of events. And like, we did the Alexander raids. We did them unsynced. And I remember Clockwork was in another city doing something, and I was over in what's that one town near Alexander?
We weren't doing Alexander. We were doing Behemoth. We were doing Bahamut.
No, we did Coils of Bahamut after this, I think. So it was the Alexander raids. We did the entire thing unsynced, and I was in that one town that's near where Alexander sits, and I just started like dancing because that's what you do in Idleshire. Yes, I started doing these like dances because that's what you do in MMOs when you're waiting for your friends to get there. And like this random guy just comes up and is like, "Oh, hey, I like your glam." And I was like, "Oh, thank you. You too. Hey, I'm about to do Alexander. You want it?" He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And we had like 4 guys just tackling this content unsynced with some other people. And then as we're flying over to Alexander, I see orange names from people that I had played with before. And I was like, "Hey, we're doing Alexander. Get in the boat." We had like 8 people. Like, it was the worst possible party composition because we had like 3 tanks, 1 healer, and like 6 dancers or something stupid like that. And it was this is really awful party, but we were all like level like 80 or something at that point when we were doing it anyway. So of course we won, but it was like one of those fun moments that you remember after the fact. And a lot of it is that feeling of familiarity and the fun story you get to write afterward. And so like that will always be a really cool thing. So I know Alexander is not one of the fondly remembered raids in Final Fantasy XIV. People generally hated Alexander. But for me, it was a lot of fun because of that social interaction element. Now, much like Cog, I'm a bit of an introvert, but I have ambivert tendencies. Especially if I have reason to talk to my party, or if my party is particularly receptive, I'll end up using the chat function and be like, "Hey, good luck, everyone. Do our best. Here's our strategy." And here's every time we would run the main story quest roulette, which we mostly did because it's like the biggest XP payout in the dailies. Back when it was basically having to just sit through a prolonged cutscene, I would do a stand-up comedy routine. And I would just come up with like these stupid, terrible game-related puns or poke fun at people's race class combinations and come up with dumb puns that way. And I remember Dutaku and I did it together, and we had this one guy who was like the perfect straight man. Like every time I did it, he'd respond. He'd be like, "Oh God, this is so terrible. I should go back and play WoW because this is so painful." It was just amazing. And having those kinds of interactions are just like, hey, that's really cool. That is genuinely a cool thing that no other genre can boast the way that an MMO can. But I think that's the double-edged sword of that social interactivity, because you end up in those situations where you do get the bad actors and the elitists, because that social element is in and of itself a neutral force, but it's how it's utilized. And that's when you get the bad experiences, and people can be turned off from the genre just as easily.
And I want to preface with the story portion of it is it's kind of like, your buddies and you're playing Dungeons and Dragons is like, as well as like you have moments where you have a really cool story to tell as you're like doing a dungeon or a raid for the first time. Things might not go as planned, or someone saves the day. I had one where in World of Warcraft, we were doing the Naxxramas raid, the one from the third expansion. My brain is not working at the moment. I'm running on like 4 hours of sleep. Frozen Throne. There we go. And I remember doing Thaddeus, which was what do you call a hot or a positive and negative fight, where you have to stand on each side of him with your group, who is either positive or negative, and if a positive meets a negative, the entire group explodes pretty much. We were doing that fight, and I remember I think he had hit an enrage timer. And he didn't hit a range timer because I would have died instantly. He did hit a range timer, but somebody messed up somewhere and people were dying, and we started losing people little by little. But as a warlock, I was playing Affliction, which I had lots of dots and self-sustain, and me and like two other people who are still alive, I were barely holding on as I was getting spam healed, and I was using drain life and my dots, and we were able to go from 1% to 0 and save the fight, like barely. I think I had like 10 like 10% HP at the end of that, just because the healer was running out of mana. So like stuff like that is really, really cool, and I have tons of stories which I'm not going to share here right now because I don't think we want a 6-hour podcast of EVE Online stories about like we try to start a wormhole revolution and a bunch of other stuff. It was really, really the story. I think the stories make up a lot, and it also adds for a lot of really cool, stuff to talk about with other friends and nerds and stuff like that.
Certainly, and I you won't hear me disagree. So let's go around. Let's go around the room and share, class. Talk about some of the MMOs that we played and our general quick thoughts on them. So, Cog, you've been a little quiet since the intro, so I'm going to lead the floor with you. Which MMOs have you tried? which ones have you tried? Which ones did you like? Which ones did you not like? And any kind of like profound, deep thoughts, profanities, or emotional outbursts that you have about them?
I've played several, or I played WoW. I've played some of the earlier ones. Anyway, the more recent ones, I'd say in the current zeitgeist of MMOs, I did play WoW. I played the first iteration of Final Fantasy. I played a bunch 11? of 11. I played 11. As I mentioned earlier, Marvel the Marvel Heroes or whatever it was. Yeah, I think that's what it was, Marvel Heroes. And then DC Online. I played Star Trek Online briefly. I played a ton of other ones that I cannot totally remember the name of. A bunch of mobile Honkai Impact stuff. Their what's that one that they do? That team.
Genshin Impact.
And Genshin Impact. I've tried a lot of them. I've tried many in MMO. I can't even remember half of the names of them, because usually I get on, I start playing for a little while, something will grab me about it, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe this one's not gonna suck. And then almost always I get to that point of like, even with the newer ones, even with some of the quote unquote better ones, it's like I feel like there's another layer of just in the game design itself of it's like half the time, oh, you're so important, you're the we need your help to save the world, blah, blah, blah. And then it's suddenly like right after you've got a swarm of other characters just waiting in line or trying to push their little, it's like you see it even in Final Fantasy. It just, there's something visually that irks me about it, where you're trying to go through this epic story or whatever, and then they show, everybody else. You see all the other characters around you are all just getting in line doing the same quests, and it feels more like gamers just being herded along through an experience, and it just, I don't know, it's a weird thing for me, and it usually ends up feeling like, yeah, this is not what I want right now. And then I guess the moral of the whole thing too is that Cog just needs to be a friendlier person, because half the time I'm not online with those games, because I kind of assume everybody's like unpleasant. But
Right.
I mean, I would say, hey, you need to play Warframe, but
I've played Warframe too. Yeah, I played Warframe for a while. I really enjoyed Warframe. But again, the problem with Warframe was more so, I don't know. It's just the grind of it, I guess, kind of pulled me off of it. I just was like, I found something else that caught my attention, and I just didn't feel like committing.
I was about to say, I really wouldn't recommend playing Warframe even still. It's just, it's got one of the most fun movement systems ever. It is just a joy to just.
It is. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
But at the same time, it is married to one of the most ass backwards, and I'm sorry, Professor. That's the only way I can really think of it. It is the most ass backwards game design in terms of, you need to get 67 kumquats, but they're only used in this one area.
Yeah. See, a lot of that just really just throws me out of the game sometimes, and it's just like, I totally agree with you. I remember Warframe being like a ton of fun, and I was like, oh, this is one of the best, free-to-play MMOs out there. And then it's like, I just got stuck in, I got tired of the grind. Something else actually grabbed my attention, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I guess I would say, of all the negatives that we have talked about with MMOs, usually all the positives that Sneck meant that Clockwork has mentioned and Sneck has mentioned are usually like, they'll pull me in, I'll try the game, but I'm almost always hit with either one or all of the negatives that Mr. Sneck has also brought up, and they always pull me out, and it always pulls me out. Even one of those negatives will pull me out of the game. So
fair, definitely fair.
I want to preface that, by the way, is that MMOs are not for everybody. I try to find MMOs that people might like if they are thinking about getting into the genre, which is why I talked about Final Fantasy 14 to these folks for a bit, because they all really liked Final Fantasy. I'm like, well, you always try the MMO, and they gave it a try and they really liked it. So now World of Warcraft stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that no matter how much they fixed everything like that, it might not be their thing, because they just might not be into the genre. I don't know. That's more of your guys to answer that if you want to or not. But I'm just saying, it's like there's a time and place for game, and especially nowadays with how little time we actually get to sit down and play games like that with work and life and stuff like that. And playing an MMO seems more and more of a fantasy than real life, because just it's harder to get time to sit down and commit to something like that.
Amen to that.
I mean, my main problem
that as well, yeah.
If we're ignoring the fact that Blizzard has made some, ignoring Blizzard just being generally awful lately, or the increasingly bonehead management of their own properties. My main problem with Warcraft is more the fact that, honestly, it's just kind of become part of the problem in terms of fantasy just becoming homogenized, and it's kind of become a meme parody of itself. Honestly, it used to be fun. It used to be interesting and weird, and now it's not that anymore. It's just big cauldron fight guy, and you know, I just think to myself, I'm like, man, remember Warcraft? Remember, exploding sheep? Yeah, I remember Zug Zug? Man.
As I've talked about as I've said before, by shattered rose tinted glasses, because I don't see WoW the same way as I do anymore. Or although I do still see it as a game I think I like more than other games, even though it's probably not as good as I think it is anymore. Either way.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just one of those things. I guess, is it my turn now?
Certainly.
Go for it.
Oh my goodness! And I have played. I have played a lot of the games that the professor mentioned, because honestly, I was, one of those people that he's like, oh yes, Nitaku, you need to play with me, and I'm like, I'll try. But now it seems like I'm the one who's dragging him to play games, and like I finally got him to play STO with me, and I felt kind of bad because I was using my max level character, and I'm like, it's okay. They'll synchronize us. Little did I, it's like, this is STO. This is a 15-year-old MMO. We don't do synchronization. That's a highfalutin new game thing. And so I was fighting, end game enemies, which was fine for me, but poor little snack was getting, two touched and
Help
destroyed.
Me. Mystery Taco, I don't feel so.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those, we were having a straight Star Trek the motion picture moment where, just the enemy would look at Snack and his ship would just disappear.
And I was like, I didn't think I was that under leveled. And it's like, no, you're not. It's the enemy is over leveled because they scale to the highest level, not the lowest one.
Yeah, they're scaled to level 65 and you're level 4. So
no, it's a little higher than that, but I was like 13, I think.
Yeah,
just gone.
Yeah. And I mean, I played a lot of PSO2. Man, I could probably wax quite a long time on my feelings on PSO2. I really liked classic PSO2. It's one of those games that it's like, you want to turn off your brain and just, do really cool space stuff for a while.
No, PSO2 is great. The problem is they bolted PSO3 onto the side of it, and they didn't want to lose all the lucrative marketing deals they made for PSO2. So they literally just attached it like a blood-sucking parasite onto the side of it and called it no content. I mean, New Genesis.
And the worst part is I a lot of the, like, I can see there are some brilliant ideas in New Genesis. The entire just, here's the world. Go out and explore the world is basically how, if it was up to me, if I had, like $100 million and 5 years and, there was some rich eccentric billionaire, it was like, Mr. Nitaku, I want you to make an MMO. I'd be like, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to set up the world so that you just do whatever. But the problem being is that, there's nothing in the world. There's nothing out there to prompt discovery. And I mean, it's kind of sad really when like Genshin Impact actually has more going on in it in the open world than your supposedly high level MMO. Come here.
Yeah, that was the entire thing, was like, oh, hey, you have this big world and there's nothing in it. Oh, and also in this big world where it takes forever to move from city to city, because even at high speeds, it's still 10 minutes between cities. Oh, there's still a perfectly linear story that in PSO2 Classic, you can literally access all from the same help window. and you didn't have to run 20 minutes to do errands between them.
I mean, that, and my main thing is the fact that, like, once again, not only did they like not have pretty much any of the classes I really liked, but on top of that, it's basically a boil to you can't do any of the main quests unless you have a high enough battle power. And I'm like, oh wow, I didn't realize I was playing Dragon Ball Online. You know, you gotta get your power level up, boys. Speaking of which, we need to play more Xenoverse too.
I mean, I would if all the post-credits content wasn't just, it's this fight, but harder. Also, this fight has 8 Saiyans in it, and they're each going to use each form of Super Saiyan as a revive.
It's okay, guys. I am Blooper Saiyan now. And also, we need to get you Beast Mode there, Professor.
Yeah, I need to look at that.
So you can gain, you know, blue hair. You can gain violet white hair.
You know, it would still better than the Boo family transformation that I get straddled with.
And you know, the funny thing is if it's anything like what I've seen for Saiyans when they go Beast Mode, it makes you look really derpy too.
Well, it's a Dragon Ball
I don't know.
Of course.
I have not seen Dragon Ball Superhero, but let me tell you, I don't know what it is about modern Dragon Ball, but it's like, you know, they take a thing from classic Dragon Ball and they're like, oh, you know, we need to bring that back. And so there's basically, we want to do the final battle with Cell again, except that, you know, without any of the emotional gravitas, what little there was in that moment. So
that's a whole
they
other conversation.
Hey, everybody, do you want us to talk about shonen anime for like 6 hours?
That will be the longest podcast.
Do it.
Well, that will set the Guinness record for longest podcast ever recorded at that rate.
It'll start with us. Yeah, it'll start with us commiserating about Naruto and the problems with the genre, to me going, okay, little childrens, let me explain why Medaka Box is the best series.
Yeah, MMOs are a weird kettle of fish, to say the least. I played a lot of them. I have forgotten more MMOs than I think the average person has probably known about. And
Digimon Masters.
I'm kind of in that. I feel like I've forgotten more of them than I can remember.
Yeah,
but I've played a lot of them.
Because like a lot of them, I would try.
Some of them are so generic too, and it's like you play them for a little while, and then you're just like, "Oh, this is dumb. I'm gonna toss this out." Because I was just like, there's so many of them I've tried, and I cannot even remember the titles to at this point.
Right. Like, there are so many, like, the thing that killed me for years and years and years was the WoW clone, where they may have had their own original story, but mechanically it was literally...
Yeah, there were so many of those, too, yes.
And I was like, this sucks, because you have taken the bog standard of MMOs and done nothing with it. Congratulations, you're Dragon Quest. And I hate you as much as I hate Dragon Quest. And that's the thing, is that, like, that WoW clone MMO mentality just was such a bog. It was this albatross on the genre that refused to allow it to grow, evolve, or expand in any meaningful capacity for like 15 or 20 years until it finally came into its own thing.
You know, which is sad, because you look at the very, very, very old MMOs and it's like, man, how did we ever get that? Because like Ultima Online didn't have this problem. EverQuest didn't have this problem.
Right. I remember EverQuest. You know, that's another one.
WoW comes along and, you know, it just is like everybody wants to be that. And it's like, I'm sorry, but, you know, looking at classic vanilla WoW, it was not. It's not like this holy grail of gameplay. It was pretty boring.
And I mean...
Go ahead, Clockwork. You may eviscerate me, launch your arrows and bombs.
Crucify the Pugum. You know you want to. Cast it into the fire.
I mean, I wanted to do that before this, but I mean,
Well,
said no.
Cast the
And he
Pugum
walked
into
away.
the fire. No.
He said no, and he walked away, and then he got shot by a bunch of other people, and Itaku vanished from the world until someone else picked him up.
Oh yeah, there's Lord of the Rings Online. There's another reference.
Oh yeah, that's another one.
Man, honestly, I do not understand why people want to mess around with the Legendarium in Legend Middle Earth. It's
Again,
money.
that's a whole other conversation.
It's money.
Yeah,
Dude, there's so many licensed MMOs that just exist because there was a market. There was money to be made, and a lot of the time they didn't care about the quality. A good licensed MMO is so much rarer than any other contemporary in the subgenre. The MMO can be any number of things, and it can be something that's really, really cool. I mean, for example, Itaku and I even played Black Desert Online up to level 15 or so before it became Cash Shop Online. But it's they had this cool dodging system. It was more like an action game. There was a little less of that WoW influence trickling in. And we're like, hey, this is actually kind of neat. I don't hate this. And then you hit the paywall. And that's where they're hoping. They're like, oh, we're going to have half of you. We're going to hook half of you and turn you into whales. And half of you are going to head for the door. But you know what? It doesn't matter if 1,000 people head for the door if we get one whale who puts out their entire paycheck every week. And that, just like mobile games.
No, you just nailed it on the head.
Yeah, it's the same problem with mobile games. Some of them are good. Some of them can be really creative and innovative, but just like those mobile games, a lot of these MMOs suffer that problem where one whale justifies 10,000 people quitting. And honestly, it's a shame because bringing people together has kind of been the concept since couch co-op became a thing in the first place. And that goes back to the very first iterations of home consoles as we understand them.
That's the thing that I wish there was more of, was just that couch co-op type design where you can play more than one or two people at a time.
Yeah. Deep Rock Galactic is a good
exactly.
example.
There's not enough. I feel like there's not as enough of them as there should be.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. Because social elements in games are not a new concept by any stretch, and the general thrust of it, I think, is a good idea on the whole. Just the execution is oftentimes let down by short-sighted corporations who are much more interested in pushing players to that cash shop as fast as possible versus giving them an engaging experience that they'll want to continue to revisit. And the thing that can oftentimes kill me is sometimes there's an MMO you do want to play and you can't. Let me tell you the legend of Monster Farm Lagoon. Monster Rancher had an MMO. You know who got it? Korea.
Not us.
You know who didn't get it? The English-speaking world and Japan. Now, don't get me wrong. Japanese and Korean are very similar. I've been told if you can read one, you can fundamentally read the other. But it's it's a Japanese game that's largely only ever had two markets: Japan and the West. Basically, it's just I don't know which of those is bigger because it's always been a bit of a cult fandom, but. Yeah, there was an MMO and it got an expansion. It was Monster Farm Online and then Monster Farm Lagoon. And it's dead. Because the biggest problem all these MMOs have to cross someday is that same problem with every other game that's always online. Is everything that goes online has to come offline eventually. And that's it. There's basically three ways of getting around that. And it's one, you find some way to put the game in perpetual maintenance mode, which is more delaying the problem than addressing it. 2, you just release the source code for the game and allow the fans to finagle their own homebrew solutions, which is cool if they're willing to part with the license, but most companies aren't. Because the third answer to this problem is just a big middle finger, and that's usually the one that you're going to get.
Because
It's funny, there actually is
all about the Benjamins.
Yep.
There is actually one cyberpunk MMO, I forget the name, that actually did that though. I don't remember what it is.
So they gave like source code to the fans?
Yeah, they basically the system, the game went under, and they just let me look it up. Necron. Neocron. Yeah, it's one of those old MMOs, like in the same level of like EverQuest and FF11. But yeah, basically the game company went under, but it's still around just because the source code got leaked, and they were able to basically like Frankenstein it back together, and it's still online because of that.
Nice.
I mean, it's not like a huge game. You know, there is a community for it,
but there's people who care enough to keep it that way.
Yeah,
that's actually really cool. I like that. And there is one
basically
special.
That was. Yeah, that was like the big thing that happened when there was the big cluster over Cyberpunk. Is people are like, oh, I can't play it, and then other people are like, well, there's this other Cyberpunk game that your toaster could play because it came out in like 2003.
Right.
Wow, but my toaster only has an RTX 20.
I think that's the biggest weakness that we've been running into in general, is that the game that runs on the server and once it's done, it's done. There was a game that I played that probably no one has heard about that had there's a team-based fighter, or like a team-based fighter where you pick a character. You got three other players who play a character, and you got 4 enemies on the other side. And your objective was to just fight and get to the enemy base and destroy their base. Very simple.
Are you talking about League of Legends?
I'm talking about this game called Gigantic.
Oh, yeah, no, I've heard about that. It's dead now, as I recall.
Yes,
it was basically.
The server was shut down, and nobody. It was shut down because apparently they had low player count, and the problem is that because they didn't share the source code, they didn't leave a communities, they didn't allow community servers or anything of that nature. The game is pretty much dead, even for players who might have still wanted to play it or anything like that. There's a lot of games like that unfortunately it runs that same thing, and we're getting to more and more games. If I remember correctly, there's a game series that's been very, very popular called Payday, which is the bank heist, cooperative bank heist game. The first and second game, to my knowledge, are standalone, games, but the third one that they're announcing that to release, I believe soonish, is an always online server based game, and not a standalone single you play single player or multiplayer. I don't know, you probably still play single player, but if the server goes down, that's it. Payday 3 is gone. I believe you can still play Payday 2 and Payday 1 even if the servers were to disappear for any reason. I could be wrong on that if they changed something recently, but to my knowledge, you can still play those games. And what else do we have here? I thought I had another game, but I don't. But yeah, it's just the always online server based. There's no real actual physical copy that you can still play, and everything is pretty. It sucks. And even like I have like my copies of Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft and stuff like that. But when the servers go down, no one's gonna like the only time there's no one's gonna be playing. No one's gonna that game's gonna be gone, and the only thing you're gonna have is the community servers that people have modded to craziness for a bunch of different things, like arena fights and stuff like that. So,
yeah, and that's the thing. Like the bigger the game, the more likely that there's going to be some kind of plausible solution for it. A lot of the mid and smaller sized games are just going to disappear. And that really is a tragedy. No one wins when a game goes offline and dies forever. Like, even if it's a game
going to be... Oh, I was about to say, this is surprisingly similar to something that I have a big fondness for. I'm a big fondness for very strange, very, 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 very old religious texts. I love looking at just old mythological treatises and stuff. And a lot of them are just not available anymore just because they're so old. And so basically what we have at most for some of them is just, people talking about them. And so we get summaries or, just the opinions of people talking about them. So, I hate to say it there, dude, your favorite MMOs and stuff are basically going to become the same as my Gnostic literature.
Oh, I know that.
I was not ready for that sentence.
But the thing is, though, too, is that like the one thing I liked about like the age when I played like games and stuff like that is like when I played Counter-Strike and stuff like that is the community server. It was built around community servers as well. So like even like to this day, you can still find people who play Counter-Strike 1.6 20 years or 15, 20 years ago or whatever, how long did I get out and Source, so you can still play it even 30 years, 40 years in the future, people still have servers for it. The games that are not inherently have community servers, stuff like that, are just doomed to be gone. That's why like a lot of people when Titanfall, I think they're planning on taking one of the servers for Titanfall down, or Titanfall 2, I don't remember which one it was. And there was a big backlash about it because people still play that game. And everyone's like, no, don't kill our game. We still play it. We don't want to play Apex. We want to play Titanfall because we like Titanfall and mechs. We don't want to play your Battle Royale game. And I believe it ended up saving the game for a bit, but I mean, the inevitability is that at one point or another, it's going to die either way. It is kind of just stayed the execution, as it were.
Yep. That is the sad reality, and no company has really offered up a long-term solution to the problem.
Well, there is a long-term solution. Make physical copies and stop being meh.
I was about to say the long-term solution is to realize that MMOs are ephemeral and that you should not, make something that is digital, your life. You should go out and live your life. And, as fun as games are, they're just games. And I, hate to say this as a nerd, as someone who enjoys digital media, but, it's the truth.
Absolutely not. Try me online all the time, every time.
No, most of the problems in the world are caused by that attitude. I know you're kidding, but I'm like...
I feel like Clockwork is going to become the villain in our war game.
Can you count backwards from 10?
It's really, really weird to see, but I do touch grass every once in a while. Even I do.
Fair. So I did want to diverge from the course, and I do want to talk about one thing, and this has bugged me for a while. We mentioned Final Fantasy XIV many times, and it's an important game, and it's one of the big MMOs, and so a lot of people have played it, and you can play the trial up through Heaven's Ward, which is important because, warning, Heaven's Ward spoilers.
Stormblood.
It's going to become Stormblood now. It's going to be Stormblood when 6.5 drops. But when this video goes live, it will still only be up through Heaven's Ward, technically. That said, Heaven's Ward spoilers. You've been warned. COG dropped the spoiler warning here.
Okay, I'll remember to do that.
So there's this thing called the Dragon Song War. And broadly speaking, the game kind of leaves it ambiguous as to who shot first. But let me explain. This is a very important treatise on the Dragon Song War, and as someone who has played up through the post-credits content in Endwalker, not all the way, but I've been through most of it, Ishgard did nothing wrong. Like, I don't mean the evil, crazy Pope guy who becomes Knights of the Round, because he was largely acting under his own capacity, and him going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs is unrelated to specifically the Dragon Song War. In regards to what happened before the Warrior of Light even gets to show up. Because the war is already started. The inciting incident has already happened, and the war has been going on for a while. Now,
and by a while, you mean 1,000 years?
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. So here's the thing. Ishgard is essentially an ethno-state. It's 95% Elazon. And every other race falls under the last sliver of whatever census data remains. So Elazon are just these tall elf people, basically. That's all you really need to know. And their primary knights are the Order Dragoon, and as more recently, the Machinists Guild, which only have come to be within the past few years in game. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. You have boys in armor with pokey sticks and some guys with some guns. Okay, so their enemy are spaceborne horrors who are giants, absolutely titanic creatures who have basically unlimited access to all magical energy just by existing. They have freakish control over the elements. Their very existence tends to geoform the world around them. They can fly. They have claws that cut through armor, a tail that's like a whip or a club, depending on species, and their scales are basically a natural armor that is all-encompassing on all sides. Many of them have horns with which to ram, gore, or stab things. And the game is yeah, this is definitely an even fight. You can definitely see how these guys with sticks.
You forgot the most damning thing about this, dude.
What's that?
The fact that they are so alien and weird that they don't even reproduce sexually. They actually reproduce via budding, and the only reason why they pair up in pairs for parenting is more for bonding. Yep. It's not because of the necessity of reproduction. In fact, that's the problem, is the fact that Midgardsormr basically is the father of all dragons, even though it's just him.
Yeah.
And so
these things invade. They're an invasive species. The very first thing they did is land on the planet Hydaelyn without any say-so from the actual native inhabitants and just tried to take over everything. And their biggest, the biggest stopgap between the rest of the world and the Draconic Horde. Faced. Yeah.
And they surprised Pikachu faced when the natives basically took their father, stabbed him into a space station, and are like, "You're going to power the moon now."
Yeah. So the thing that stands between worldwide domination of the greatest evil that Hydaelyn has ever seen is some guys with little pointy metal bits on the end of sticks. But we're supposed to believe this war is perfectly balanced, even, and no one is at fault, despite the fact that the Draconic Horde invaded Hydaelyn and then proceeded to engage in the Dragon Song War, because Midgardsormr basically just doesn't shut up and creates this, apparently subsonic frequency only dragons can hear that constantly entices them to violence. So if Dad says, "Okay, kids, it's time to go to war and murder all these Elazon who literally were just trying to survive," sucks to be the Elazon, because that's what the dragons are going to do.
Okay, one minor correction. While Midgardsormr does do that, the entire impetus for the Dragon Song War was the fact that they killed Ratatoskr.
Ratatoskr, that's right.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's because they entered that one particular valley in Dravania. They killed Ratatoskr and basically stole her eyes, which is what allows the dragoons to do their dragon magic.
Right. So here's the thing. The game leaves it ambiguous as to whether Ratatoskar provoked the Dragoons or if the Dragoons provoked Ratatoskar. My point is that point is completely immaterial. The dragons are already an evil alien invading force whose very existence, by purely being there, is disruptive to the ecosystem of Heidelin, which has no natural predators. Nothing eats dragons with the possible exception of other dragons. The only things that have yet to pose a legitimate threat to them are some of the greatest demonic forces of the void that really mildly inconvenience the dragons, but you don't see the Dravanian forces helping the Warrior of Light in any meaningful capacity. They're just, hey, you should feel bad for the spaceborne eldritch horrors that invaded this planet because they're sad because someone killed one of the millions of these parasites and the way they spread across the world. And also, there was this sad lady who really, really liked to kiss dragons. And you should feel bad because that lady is sad. I do not feel sad for Shiva. Shiva is dead, okay? Shiva is dead and a betrayer to the Elazon peoples who literally have to hide in castles of stone and with their pokey sticks to defend themselves. Then literally the only reason there's as many dragoons as there are
Not yet.
the only reason there's as many dragoons as there are is because job stones came to be a thing and they could pass the training on to their children. Because here's another fun fact. Dragons don't die of old age in Final Fantasy. So they're still just chilling, waiting for their chance to murder more Ishgardians. This is not a fair and balanced war with no one to blame on either side. The dragons started the war. The dragons prolonged the war. And it was the Warrior of Light, whatever race you're playing, essentially a human, is the one who steps in and is like, hey, maybe you need to stop murdering Elazon. maybe you need to stop doing that. You shouldn't commit mass genocide, okay? Genocide's bad, okay? I'm sorry, but the Dragon Song War is really the war of draconic aggression, and I'm never apologizing. Ishgard did nothing wrong. Dragoons are absolutely blameless and based and awesome. And you guys need to, high five your local dragoon because no one's going to tank the floor more reliably than them, and you should rely on them for their expertise in dragon killing and floor tanking. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Any questions?
Golf clap.
I'll take golf clap. I'm cool with that.
I mean, from my point of the story, I feel like them coming to Eorzea and that whole thing is a bit more justified, but the means did not justify the ends in either way. Hey, and unfortunately, a little bit of talking could have went a ways, but when
if they had shown up and been like, hey, we need to negotiate and purchase some land or something, I wouldn't have this beef with these guys. But that's not what they did. And that's kind of a thing that you see repeated because, spoilers for later in the story, there's this dragon who just conquers an entire continent and sets himself up as their unrivaled god king with no contest or way to ever go against what he wants. And that's supposed to be a good thing. The unopposed absolute monarch is supposed to be a good thing. Just saying, not a fan. Dragons gotta die, because that's what dragons are supposed to do. Yeah, I said it. All right, so we've gone on long enough. This has been the Hipster Snack, and I'm sorry, I almost said your names at the same time, and that was almost incredibly tragic. So let me try that again. Along with me tonight was Clockwork Fiction,
who might be known as Cogworks all of a sudden.
I almost said Cogworks. I'm sorry. You guys have not, in fact, used the Patara earrings. It's just a slip. Cog.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for putting up with my general disdain for MMOs for this whole conversation. I apologize.
No, and again, having that the devil's advocate, I think, makes it more fascinating. And, of course, Mr. Ditaku, who may or may not be indisposed at the moment, but that's okay. No, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me this fine evening and hashing out this long-winded discussion on a genre where I think a lot stands to be improved and a lot can be learned therefrom. So, if you guys like today's episode, please like, comment, subscribe, and all that other good shill stuff that I'm obligated to do. Leave a comment down below. What MMOs do you like? Which ones do you not like? What do you think could improve MMOs and make them more accessible to people who are curious about the genre? We'd really like to hear what you have to say. This is the Hipster Snack and the Tomodachi Brothers, and we are signing off for now.
Bye.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the Tomodachi Brothers Review Podcast, produced and recorded by the Hipster Snack, Ditaku, and Cog. Sound design and editing by executive producer Sean Taylor Brown with Cog Sound Engineering. Music written and performed by Sean Taylor Brown with Costas Vaz of Core Insight Studio on the drums. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you next time.